I never thought I'd be the one sitting in that leather chair watching my ex-wife's squirm under the fluorescent lights of the bankruptcy courtroom. 2 years earlier, she'd thrown me out of our home with nothing but a backpack and the clothes on my back. "Your name isn't on the deed," she'd said, slamming the door as rain soaked through my jacket. I disappeared that night, not just from her life, but from everyone who knew me. I changed my number, moved across 3 state lines, and rebuilt myself from scratch. Nobody, especially not her, knew what I'd discovered in those final days before she kicked me out. Financial documents hidden in the attic revealing years of fraud that had funded our picture-perfect life. I'd kept those papers, though. And when her bankruptcy notice appeared in public records, I knew exactly what I needed to do. The court clerk called for any creditors present in the matter of Caroline Weber. I stood up, documents in hand, and watched her face drain of color as she recognized me. "Yes, Your Honor," I said, my voice steady for the first time in years. "I believe I have information that changes everything about this case." Caroline and I met at a marketing conference in Chicago 15 years ago. I was giving a presentation on digital strategy. She was the rising star of a competing firm. We collided at the hotel bar afterward, 2 ambitious women who recognized something in each other, a hunger, a drive that most people couldn't understand. 6 months later, we were married at the Cook County Courthouse with only her sister as witness. "You're the steady one," Caroline would say, praising my methodical approach to our finances. "I'm the visionary." And she was brilliant, magnetic, the kind of person who could charm investors into backing her ideas with nothing but confidence and PowerPoint slides. When she started her own consulting company, I left my stable job to support her dream, handling the back office while she dazzled clients. We bought our colonial revival house in Connecticut with her first major payout, a sprawling place with a wraparound porch and rooms we planned to fill with children someday. Those children never came, but success did. Caroline's client list grew more exclusive. Our vacations became more extravagant. I managed our home while she managed our future. At least that's how she framed it. My mother, a retired schoolteacher from Albuquerque, visited once and never returned. "There's something not right about that woman," she whispered when Caroline was out of earshot. "She treats you like an employee, not a wife." I defended Caroline fiercely then. Mom didn't understand East Coast success, I told myself. She didn't understand ambition. The humiliations were small at first. Caroline forgetting to introduce me at company parties, or interrupting my stories to tell them better herself. Then came the Christmas dinner, where she detailed my failed IVF treatments to her entire family, describing how my biological shortcomings had derailed our family plans. I sat silent, smiling through tears while her mother patted my hand sympathetically. For our 10th anniversary, I surprised Caroline with a hand-restored 1967 Mustang, her dream car since college. I'd spent 2 years working secretly with a mechanic in New Haven, learning to rebuild parts myself, pouring my heart into every detail. When I unveiled it in our driveway, she circled it once and said, "The paint is the wrong shade of red. And honestly, Rachel, couldn't you have just bought a new one? It's not like we can't afford it." She never drove it, not once. What Caroline didn't know, what no one knew, was that I'd begun noticing discrepancies in our finances. Small things at first. Expense reports with duplicate entries, client invoices that didn't match bank deposits. I told myself it was just Caroline's disorganization, her creative mind too busy for details. Then I found the offshore account statements hidden in a locked file box in the attic, along with a second passport in her name. The transactions matched perfectly with the business development trips she'd been taking to the Cayman Islands for years. The amounts were staggering, millions siphoned from her clients, from our joint accounts, from everywhere. I was still processing what to do with this information when Caroline came home early from a business trip and found me with the documents spread across our bed. That night became a blur of accusations. Caroline didn't deny anything. She just coldly calculated how much I knew and what risk I posed. "You've always been so naive about how business really works," she said, pacing our bedroom, her designer heels clicking against the hardwood. "These are accelerated investment strategies, not fraud. Everyone does it." I remember her face shifting when I mentioned the second passport. Something darker took over her expression, something I'd never seen before. She left the room without another word and slept in the guest bedroom. The next morning, she was gone before dawn. "Emergency client meeting" was all her text said. For 3 days, I existed in limbo, sleeping with those damning documents under my pillow. I called an attorney friend from my previous job, described the situation hypothetically. His advice was unequivocal. This person needs to report what they found. Being a spouse doesn't protect you from being considered an accessory. I was preparing to do exactly that when Caroline returned, surprisingly warm, suggesting we needed a reset weekend. She booked us into the Mayflower Inn in Washington, Connecticut, our favorite luxury escape. Something felt off, but I was desperate to believe we could work through this. I packed carefully, making copies of the key documents and mailing them to my mother with instructions to hold them. The Mayflower was hosting a finance industry retreat that weekend. Caroline insisted we attend the gala dinner Saturday night, where she was receiving a Women in Leadership Award. "It would mean everything to have you by my side," she said, helping me choose a dress, a navy blue gown that complemented her crimson one. The ballroom sparkled with Connecticut's financial elite. Caroline worked the room masterfully, introducing me properly for once. "My wife, Rachel, the backbone of my success," she kept saying, her arm linked through mine. I almost believed her renewed affection until I overheard her in the ladies' room, phone pressed to her ear. "It's all arranged. She doesn't suspect anything. I'll have clean access to the accounts by Monday." During dinner, Caroline was seated at the head table while I was placed with strangers at a table near the back. The awards presentation began, and I watched my wife accept her crystal trophy with practiced humility. "I believe in transparency and integrity above all," she told the applauding crowd. "Without those values, we have nothing." My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Check your personal checking account now." I excused myself to the lobby, opened my banking app, and felt my stomach drop. Every account where my name appeared was emptied. Our joint savings, my personal checking, even my retirement fund, all drained to zero. When I returned to the ballroom, Caroline was deep in conversation with a silver-haired man I recognized as the head of the Connecticut Banking Commission. Her laugh carried across the room as she placed her hand on his arm. Our eyes met briefly. She raised her champagne glass in my direction with the smallest smile. The hotel room key didn't work when I tried to return to our suite. At the front desk, I was informed that "Miss Weber has checked out and left this for you." The envelope contained $300 cash and a note. "This should get you home. We'll talk Monday." No mention of our emptied accounts. I called an Uber with shaking hands, still wearing my gala dress. The driver asked if I was okay. I must have looked like a wreck. "Just a bad date," I managed to say. When we reached our house, every light was blazing, and unfamiliar cars filled the driveway. Through the windows, I could see people moving around, removing things, carrying boxes. Caroline met me at the door. "Don't make a scene," she warned quietly, as movers passed us carrying artwork. "Your name isn't on the deed, Rachel. It never was. I've been advised to protect my assets given the irregularities you've discovered." She pressed my backpack into my arms, already packed with some clothes and toiletries. "I've called you a hotel room for tonight. My attorney will contact you about divorce proceedings." The rain started as the Uber pulled away. I had $300, a backpack, and the dawning realization that I was homeless at 42 years old with no access to funds and evidence of massive fraud that implicated me by proximity. My phone buzzed with another text from the unknown number. Check your personal checking account now. I excused myself to the lobby, opened my banking app, and felt my stomach drop. Every account where my name appeared was emptied. Our joint savings, my personal checking, even my retirement fund, all drained to zero. When I returned to the ballroom, Caroline was deep in conversation with a silver-haired man I recognized as the head of the Connecticut Banking Commission. Her laugh carried across the room as she placed her hand on his arm. Our eyes met briefly. She raised her champagne glass in my direction with the smallest smile. The hotel room key didn't work when I tried to return to our suite. At the front desk, I was informed that Miss Weber has checked out and left this for you. The envelope contained $300 cash and a note. This should get you home. We'll talk Monday. No mention of our emptied accounts. I called an Uber with shaking hands, still wearing my gala dress. The driver asked if I was okay. I must have looked like a wreck. Just a bad date, I managed to say. When we reached our house, every light was blazing, and unfamiliar cars filled the driveway. Through the windows, I could see people moving around, removing things, carrying boxes. Caroline met me at the door. "Don't make a scene," she warned quietly, as movers passed us carrying artwork. "Your name isn't on the deed, Rachel. It never was. I've been advised to protect my assets given the irregularities you've discovered." She pressed my backpack into my arms, already packed with some clothes and toiletries. "I've called you a hotel room for tonight. My attorney will contact you about divorce proceedings." The rain started as the Uber pulled away. I had $300, a backpack, and the dawning realization that I was homeless at 42 years old with no access to funds and evidence of massive fraud that implicated me by proximity. My phone buzzed with another text from the unknown number. "Terminal 4, JFK, ticket under your name. Tomorrow, 10 a.m. She'll empty the storage unit next, M." I didn't know who M was, but they were right about one thing. I needed to disappear. I spent that night in a roadside motel, paying cash, using the burner phone that mysterious M had somehow left in my backpack. The next morning, I found myself at JFK, staring at a one-way ticket to Phoenix, Arizona. Only then did I realize M must be Megan, Caroline's executive assistant, quiet, efficient Megan who had always been kind to me while remaining invisible to her demanding boss. Phoenix meant starting over with nothing but proximity to my mother in Albuquerque. I used the ticket. For the next 18 months, I lived under the radar, working cash jobs, using my middle name, building a new life, one painstaking step at a time. I got a position as an office manager at a small law firm specializing in financial fraud. Ironic, but it paid the bills and slowly rebuilt my decimated credit. I never told them about Caroline. Meanwhile, I kept meticulous digital tabs on my ex-wife from afar. Caroline's star continued to rise for a while. She remarried 6 months after our divorce, a junior senator from Connecticut with ambitions for higher office. Her firm expanded, with splashy features in business magazines celebrating her innovative approaches to wealth management. But empires built on fraud eventually crumble. 15 months after she'd thrown me out, the first lawsuit appeared, a former client alleging misappropriation of funds. Then another, and another. The SEC opened an investigation. Caroline's new husband distanced himself with remarkable speed. Her company's stock plummeted. When the bankruptcy filing appeared in public records, I knew it was time. I contacted the federal prosecutor handling the mounting fraud cases against her, sharing what I knew and the documents I'd preserved. They were particularly interested in the offshore accounts. Apparently, Caroline had emptied those too before they could be frozen. The bankruptcy hearing was scheduled for a Thursday morning at the federal courthouse in Hartford. I flew in the night before, checked into an anonymous hotel, and prepared myself. The prosecutor had arranged for me to be there, but Caroline wouldn't know until the moment I stood up. The courtroom was smaller than I expected, wood-paneled and formal. I sat in the back, watching Caroline enter with her attorney, both dressed expensively but showing the strain of the past months. She'd lost weight. Her signature red lipstick looked harsh against her pallor. I felt nothing seeing her there, neither triumph nor pity, just clarity. In the matter of Caroline Weber, bankruptcy petition under Chapter 7, the clerk announced. Proceedings began with her attorney presenting her as a victim of market downturns and vindictive clients. The judge seemed skeptical, particularly about the substantial, unexplained assets that had disappeared over the previous 2 years. Then came the moment. Are there any creditors present who wish to be heard? I stood. Yes, Your Honor. Caroline turned, her composure cracking as she recognized me. Her attorney whispered urgently in her ear. State your name and relationship to the petitioner, the judge instructed. Rachel Sandoval Weber. I'm her ex-wife and former business partner. I approached the front with steady steps, handing copies of my documentation to the court clerk. I have evidence regarding hidden assets, fraudulent transfers, and offshore accounts that directly contradict the financial disclosure in this petition. The judge reviewed the papers with increasing interest. These are serious allegations, Miss Sandoval Weber. They're more than allegations, Your Honor. They're documented facts. I turned to face Caroline directly for the first time, including the $4.2 million transferred to the Cayman account 3 days before she emptied our joint assets and removed me from our home. Caroline's attorney requested a recess. The judge denied it. You disappeared, Caroline finally said, her voice barely audible. You were supposed to just disappear. I did, I replied, until it mattered that I didn't. As I walked out of the courtroom, federal agents were already waiting to speak with Caroline. Her new husband was noticeably absent. The court had frozen what assets remained, appointing a receiver to investigate my claims. Outside on the courthouse steps, Megan waited, my mysterious M, with a gentle smile and documents proving she'd been gathering evidence against Caroline for years. The weeks following the bankruptcy hearing unfolded like a fever dream. Federal prosecutors upgraded their investigation from fraud to money laundering and tax evasion. Caroline's carefully constructed facade crumbled spectacularly in real time, splashed across the Connecticut business pages that had once celebrated her rise. Her senator husband filed for annulment, claiming he'd been deceived about fundamental aspects of her character and finances. The irony wasn't lost on me. My testimony became central to the government's case. Each deposition forced me to confront how thoroughly I'd been manipulated, not just financially, but emotionally. How had I missed the signs? A forensic accountant walked me through years of transactions, showing how Caroline had systematically siphoned money while making me believe we were building something together. It's not uncommon, the FBI financial crime specialist told me gently. Intimate partner financial abuse follows patterns: isolation from family, controlled access to joint resources, gaslighting about money concerns. These are textbook tactics. I stayed with my mother in Albuquerque between court appearances, healing in the desert landscape of my childhood. She never once said, "I told you so," about Caroline, just held my hand during my darkest moments of self-doubt. "You survived," she would remind me. "That's not weakness, that's your strength." Megan became an unexpected ally through it all. Over late-night calls, she revealed how she'd watched Caroline's schemes unfold from her position as executive assistant, gathering evidence while searching for someone trustworthy to share it with. "When I saw how she treated you that night at the Mayflower, I knew you were another victim, not an accomplice," she explained. "The storage unit was where she kept the backup financial records. I knew she'd clean it out next." The storage unit revelation led investigators to another breakthrough. Caroline had maintained a second set of books for years, documenting her actual activities while presenting fabricated records to investors, clients, and me. The extent of her fraud was staggering, nearly $30 million diverted through an elaborate network of shell companies and offshore accounts. 6 months after the bankruptcy hearing, the court ordered asset recovery proceedings. To everyone's surprise, substantial funds were located in Singapore and Switzerland. The judge appointed me as a representative for the defrauded investor class, acknowledging that I'd been both victim and whistleblower. Gradually, legitimate assets were separated from fraudulent ones, and a restitution plan was established. I received an unexpected call from our old neighbor in Connecticut who'd purchased our house at a foreclosure auction. "There's something here you might want," he said cryptically. When I arrived, he led me to the detached garage where the 1967 Mustang still sat, covered in dust but untouched. "She never sold it," he explained. When I asked about it during the property inspection, she said it wasn't hers to sell. The moment stunned me. This single act of reluctant integrity in Caroline's otherwise comprehensive betrayal. I ran my hand along the car's hood, remembering the hours I'd spent learning about carburetors and transmission systems, the pride I'd felt presenting it to her. The restoration shop had kept my name on the title as a surprise, the only asset Caroline couldn't legally touch. As criminal proceedings intensified, Caroline's attorney approached me about a cooperation agreement. She wanted to meet. Against my lawyer's advice, I agreed to a supervised visit at the federal detention center where she awaited trial. Caroline looked diminished in her standard-issue jumpsuit, her signature perfect hair now showing gray roots. For 20 minutes, she offered justifications disguised as apologies. "The system is designed for people to fail," she insisted. "I just played by the real rules, not the public ones." "The real victims are the people who trusted you," I replied, "including me." Something flickered across her face, perhaps the closest to genuine remorse she could manage. "I did love you, Rachel, in my way." "Your way wasn't love," I said, standing to leave. "It was ownership." After 18 months of legal proceedings, Caroline accepted a plea deal: 15 years in federal prison, forfeiture of all assets, and full cooperation in recovering funds for her victims. The day she was sentenced, I didn't attend court. Instead, I drove the Mustang along the Pacific Coast Highway, windows down, finally understanding that my life had never been about Caroline's validation. I established a small foundation with my portion of the recovered funds, focused on supporting survivors of financial abuse. Megan joined as my operations director, bringing her meticulous organizational skills and quiet compassion to our work. What began as a professional partnership evolved into something more, a slow-blooming relationship built on radical honesty about money, power, and trust. We bought a modest house outside Santa Fe with both our names on every document. My mother visits often, filling the kitchen with the smell of green chili stew and telling Megan embarrassing stories from my childhood. Sometimes at night, I still wake up panicking that it's all been taken away again. But Megan just holds me until the fear subsides, reminding me that we've built something real, something transparent. The most unexpected turn came last month when Caroline's former senator husband announced his presidential exploratory committee. Political reporters digging through his past inevitably found their way to me, seeking insider commentary on the scandal that had nearly derailed his career. I declined every interview. Instead, I sent him a brief, private message. "Tell the truth about what you knew and when, or I will." He suspended his campaign the following week, citing family considerations. Some nights, I still dream of that rainy night on our doorstep, the moment everything was taken from me. But now the dream continues, showing me walking away, rebuilding, finding my voice again, finding myself. Today, the Mustang sits in our driveway in Santa Fe, restored once more, this time with Megan's help. Its color is exactly the right shade of red now. Sometimes I think about sending Caroline a photo of it in her prison's approved email system, but some victories are sweeter when kept private. The woman who thought she could erase me completely instead gave me the gift of rediscovering who I truly am, someone stronger, wiser, and finally free of the need for anyone else's approval. If there's one thing I've learned through this journey, it's that your value isn't determined by what someone takes from you, but by what you choose to rebuild afterward. Don't let anyone convince you that their version of your story is the only one that matters. Your truth has power, even when, especially when, someone else tries to silence it. If you've experienced something similar or know someone who has, remember that disappearing isn't the only option. Resources exist, and you're not alone. Share this video if it resonated with you. Subscribe for more stories of resilience, and remember, sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply stand up and say your name when no one expects to hear it.